The flashing red and blue lights reflected off my barn doors as 3 police cars pulled into my driveway. I stood there in my boots, covered in hay dust, holding a bucket of oats while my 2 beautiful horses, Buttercup and Thunder, munched grass peacefully behind me. My neighbor, Karen Hendricks, stood at the property line with her arms crossed, a smug smile plastered across her face. "Officers, those dangerous animals are violating our HOA rules," she shouted, pointing at my horses like they were wild bears. "This is a residential community, not a barnyard." The lead officer, a kind-looking man named Officer Martinez, looked at my horses, then at Karen, then back at me with the most confused expression I'd ever seen on anyone's face. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "those are horses, they're just eating grass." "Exactly," Karen shrieked. "Farm animals, in our neighborhood, it's against everything we stand for." What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known in that moment, was that her phone call to the police that sunny Tuesday afternoon would end up changing everything. Not just for me, but for her precious gated community too. Because sometimes, when you push too hard to get what you want, the universe has a funny way of pushing back even harder. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 6 months before those police cars showed up, I was living in a tiny apartment in downtown Seattle, working 60-hour weeks at a tech company, barely seeing sunlight, and feeling like my soul was slowly shrinking. I grew up on my grandparents' farm in Montana, and every single day in that concrete jungle, I missed the smell of fresh air, the sound of birds in the morning, and the feeling of grass under my feet. When my grandmother passed away and left me some money, I made a decision. I was going to buy property, real property, land where I could breathe, where I could have animals, where I could remember what it felt like to be alive. That's how I found the 5 acres in Willow Creek Estates. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Linda, drove me out to see it on a beautiful spring morning. The property was gorgeous, rolling green land, some woods at the back, and a cute little farmhouse that needed work but had good bones. There was even an old barn that just needed some fixing up. "Now there is an HOA," Linda mentioned as we walked the property, "but it's pretty relaxed. They mostly just make sure people keep their grass mowed and don't paint their houses crazy colors." I asked to see the HOA rules. Linda handed me a thick packet, but I focused on the important stuff. The property was zoned as residential agricultural, which meant I could have animals. The HOA rules said nothing about farm animals being prohibited. There were rules about dogs barking and trash cans, but nothing about horses or chickens or anything like that. "This is perfect," I said, breathing in the fresh air. "I'll take it." Linda smiled. "You're going to love it here. The community is really nice. Most people keep to themselves, very peaceful." Most people, it turned out, was the key phrase. I moved in on a Saturday in April. The farmhouse was small but cozy, 2 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a porch that wrapped around the front. I spent the first few weeks painting walls, fixing the porch railing, and cleaning up the barn. My best friend from college, Jessica, came to help me, and we worked from sunrise to sunset, laughing and planning all the things I'd do with the property. "Are you really going to get horses?" Jessica asked, taking a break from painting the kitchen cabbage white. "2 horses," I said, grinning. "I've already been looking. There's a rescue about an hour from here that has the sweetest mare, and my old riding instructor knows someone selling a gentle gelding." "Sarah the horse girl returns," Jessica laughed. "Remember when we'd go riding back in college and you'd talk for hours about having your own horses someday?" "Someday is now," I said, feeling happier than I'd been in years. The neighbors started stopping by during those first weeks. Most of them were wonderful. There was Tom and Betty Rodriguez next door to the east, a retired couple who brought me homemade cookies and told me they were thrilled to have a young person in the neighborhood. Across the street lived the Johnsons, a family with 3 kids who were excited to hear I might get horses. "Can we come see them when you get them?" asked little Emma Johnson, who was about 7 years old. "Of course," I told her. "You can even help me brush them if your parents say it's okay." Then there was the Chen family, the Williamses, and old Mr. Patterson, who lived alone and liked to walk his beagle past my place every evening. Everyone seemed friendly and normal. Everyone except Karen Hendricks. I met Karen on my 3rd week in the neighborhood. I was outside repairing a section of fence when a silver luxury SUV pulled up to my driveway. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of a country club magazine. Perfect blonde hair, designer workout clothes that had probably never seen actual sweat, and sunglasses that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Hello," I called out, wiping my dirty hands on my jeans and walking over. "I'm Sarah, just moved in." The woman looked me up and down like I was something stuck to her shoe. "Karen Hendricks," she said without smiling. "I'm the HOA president." "Oh great," I said, trying to be friendly. "It's nice to meet you. I got the HOA rules from my real estate agent, and I'll need to do a property inspection," Karen interrupted. "The previous owners let this place become an eyesore. I need to make sure you're bringing it up to community standards." I blinked. "Well, I'm working on fixing it up. The barn needs some." "The barn?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Why does the barn matter? This is a residential community." "The property is zoned residential agricultural," I explained. "I'm planning to have some animals, just a couple of horses and maybe some chickens eventually." Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red. "Absolutely not." "I'm sorry," I said, confused. "Farm animals are not appropriate for Willow Creek Estates," she said, her voice getting louder. "This is a high-quality residential community. We have standards. But the zoning allows it, and the HOA rules don't prohibit." "I don't care what some old zoning map says," Karen snapped. "I will not have barnyard animals ruining our property values. I'll be calling an emergency HOA board meeting about this." She turned on her designer heel and marched back to her SUV, leaving me standing there completely stunned. Tom Rodriguez, who'd been gardening in his yard, walked over. "Don't mind Karen," he said kindly. "She thinks she runs the whole neighborhood, but you're right, the zoning does allow agricultural use. My uncle had chickens here for years before he moved." "Why is she so upset?" I asked. Tom sighed. "Karen lives in that big compound at the end of Oakwood Drive, you know, the one with the fancy gates and the huge house. She's been trying to get the whole community upgraded to purely residential for years. She thinks farm animals are beneath us." He rolled his eyes. "Just ignore her and do your thing. Most of us think it's great you're fixing up the old McAllister place." I tried to take Tom's advice. I kept working on the house and barn, and 3 weeks later, I brought home Buttercup and Thunder. Buttercup was a gentle Palomino mare from the rescue. She'd been neglected by her previous owners, but was sweet as pie once she learned to trust again. Thunder was a strong bay gelding, calm and patient, perfect for trail riding. The moment they arrived, walking down the trailer ramp onto my property, I felt like I'd finally come home. Emma Johnson and her siblings came over that very afternoon, and I let them pet the horses and feed them carrots. Their squeals of delight made my whole heart happy. Other neighbors stopped by too, curious and friendly. Everyone loved the horses. Everyone except Karen. The next morning, I found a formal letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA, written on fancy letterhead, demanding that I remove the farm animals within 30 days or face fines of $500 per day. It was signed by Karen Hendricks and 2 other board members. I called an attorney that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Wung, and she specialized in property law. "Do they have any legal ground to stand on?" I asked after explaining the situation. Patricia reviewed the HOA bylaws and the property zoning. "No," she said firmly. "Your property is properly zoned, you're not violating any county ordinances, and the HOA's own rules don't prohibit what you're doing. This letter is essentially meaningless. However, I'd recommend you attend their next board meeting and address this directly." The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening in the community center. I showed up early with all my documents, my deed, the zoning verification, the HOA bylaws, and a letter from Patricia stating that I was in full compliance with all laws and regulations. The community center was a small building near the neighborhood entrance. About 20 people were there, sitting in folding chairs. Karen sat at a table in the front with 2 other board members, a nervous-looking man named Doug Peters and a quiet woman named Susan Crawford. Karen called the meeting to order, and after some routine business about pool maintenance and upcoming community events, she got to what she really wanted to talk about. "We have a serious issue that threatens the very character of our community," Karen announced dramatically. "One of our newest residents has decided to turn her property into a farm, complete with horses. This is absolutely unacceptable for a residential community of our caliber." I raised my hand. "May I respond?" Karen looked annoyed, but nodded. I stood up and calmly explained everything: the zoning, the lack of any prohibition in the HOA rules, the legal opinion from my attorney. I passed out copies of my documents to everyone in the room. I'm not running a commercial farm, I explained. I have 2 horses for personal use. They're well cared for, the barn is clean, and they don't bother anyone. Several neighbors have already met them and haven't had any complaints. Tom Rodriguez stood up. I think it's great. My kids love seeing the horses when we drive by. Betty Rodriguez nodded. It adds charm to the neighborhood. I don't mind at all, said Mr. Johnson. My kids have been talking about nothing else for days. Karen's face was getting redder and redder. This isn't about whether people like horses. This is about maintaining property values and community standards. Actually, said Doug Peters quietly, looking at the documents I'd provided, it looks like she's legally in the right. The HOA can't prohibit something that's explicitly allowed by zoning. That's ridiculous. Karen slammed her hand on the table. I am the president of this HOA, and I say farm animals don't belong here. But the rules, Susan Crawford started to say. We'll change the rules, Karen declared. I'm calling for a vote to amend the HOA bylaws to prohibit all agricultural animals. Patricia had warned me this might happen. According to the HOA bylaws, rule changes required a 2/3 vote of all homeowners, not just the board. You'll need a full community vote for that, I said calmly, and it can't be retroactive, so it wouldn't affect me anyway. Karen looked like she wanted to explode. The meeting ended with no resolution, but I could tell most of the neighbors were on my side. Several people came up afterward to tell me they supported me and thought Karen was being unreasonable. She's just mad because she can't control everything, whispered Mr. Patterson. Don't let her bully you, young lady. I went home feeling pretty good about things. I'd stood up for myself, I had the law on my side, and most of my neighbors were supportive. But I'd underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go. The harassment started small. Karen would drive by my property several times a day, slowing down to stare. She filed noise complaints with the county, claiming my horses were disturbing the peace, even though horses are generally quiet animals and Thunder and Buttercup barely made any sound. Each complaint was investigated and dismissed. She sent me letters every few days, each one more threatening than the last. She tried to get the other board members to find me, but Doug and Susan refused, saying I wasn't violating any rules. Then Karen started taking pictures. She'd stand at the property line with her phone, photographing my horses, my barn, my house, everything. It was creepy and invasive, but technically she was on public road, so there wasn't much I could do about it. She's building a case, Patricia warned me. She's going to try to find something, anything, she can use against you. But I'm not doing anything wrong, I said, frustrated. I know, just keep detailed records of everything. Every interaction, every letter, every complaint. Document it all. I did. I started a file with dates, times, and descriptions of everything Karen did. I took pictures of my clean, well-maintained barn and healthy, happy horses. I got letters from my veterinarian confirming that Buttercup and Thunder were properly cared for and vaccinated. Summer came and things seemed to calm down a bit. Karen still drove by regularly, but the letters stopped. I let myself relax and just enjoy my life. I'd wake up early, feed the horses, go to my new remote job working for a smaller tech company with better hours, and spend my evenings riding or working on the property. Jessica came to visit several times. And we'd ride through the woods behind my house. Emma Johnson started coming over twice a week to help me groom the horses with her parents' permission. I taught her how to brush them properly, how to clean their hooves, and how to be gentle and confident around such big animals. Watching her face light up when Buttercup nuzzled her looking for treats was one of the best parts of my week. You're really good with her, Emma's mom, Rachel, told me one afternoon. She talks about horses non-stop now. You've inspired her. I'm happy to have her help, I said honestly, and it's nice to share this with someone who appreciates it. Life was good, really good. I'd found my peace. And then, on a Tuesday morning in late August, everything exploded. I was in the barn, mucking out stalls and singing along to music playing from my phone when I heard vehicles pulling up, multiple vehicles. I walked out to find not one, not two, but 3 police cars in my driveway, lights flashing. And there was Karen, standing at the property line in her designer clothes, pointing at my horses like they were dangerous criminals. with the biggest, smuggest smile I'd ever seen on a human face. "Where are you watching from?" My heart was pounding in my chest as Officer Martinez approached me. Behind him, 2 other officers were getting out of their cars. Karen was practically bouncing on her toes with excitement at the property line, like she was watching her favorite show. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" Officer Martinez asked, his voice professional but kind. "Yes, that's me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's this about?" "We received a call about dangerous animals on the property, complaints about health hazards and public safety concerns." He glanced back at Karen, then at Buttercup and Thunder, who were completely unbothered by all the excitement and had gone back to munching grass. "Those are the animals in question." "Those are my horses, yes," I said. "Buttercup and Thunder, they're about as dangerous as teddy bears." One of the other officers, a younger woman with kind eyes, actually smiled. "They're beautiful," she said quietly. Karen apparently heard that because she marched closer, staying just on the other side of the property line. "Officers, I've documented numerous violations. Those animals are creating unsanitary conditions, the smell is unbearable, and they're a danger to children in the neighborhood." Officer Martinez turned to her. "Ma'am, I need you to step back and let us conduct our investigation." "Investigation?" Karen sputtered. "Just look at them, farm animals in a residential neighborhood. It's obviously illegal." "Actually, ma'am, that's not how this works," the third officer, an older man with gray hair, said patiently. "We need to verify if there are any actual violations." I took a deep breath. "Officers, would you like to see my permits and documentation? I have everything, property zoning verification, veterinary records, HOA bylaws, everything." "That would be helpful," Officer Martinez said. I invited them to follow me to the house. Karen tried to come too, but Officer Martinez held up his hand. "Ma'am, please wait here, this is private property." The look on Karen's face was priceless. I almost felt bad, almost. Inside my kitchen, I spread out all my documents on the table. The 3 officers reviewed everything carefully. My property deed showing the residential agricultural zoning. The county records confirming I was allowed to have livestock. The veterinary certificates showing Buttercup and Thunder were healthy, vaccinated, and well cared for. The HOA bylaws that said nothing about prohibiting farm animals. Even photos I'd taken of the clean barn and well-maintained pasture. Officer Martinez looked up at me. "Ms. Mitchell, everything appears to be in order. Your property is properly zoned, your animals are legal, and from what I can see, they're well cared for." "Can we see the barn and the area where you keep them?" the female officer asked, just to complete our report. "Of course," I said, relieved. We walked outside and I showed them everything. The barn was clean, I mucked out the stalls every single day. The pasture had fresh water troughs that I filled twice daily. The fence was secure and well-maintained. Buttercup and Thunder were healthy, shiny, and clearly content. The older officer actually laughed. "Ma'am, I grew up on a farm. This is one of the nicest small horse setups I've seen. Some people with expensive stables don't keep their animals this well." Karen, who had been packing at the property line the whole time, practically ran over when she saw us coming back. "Well, are you going to cite her? Remove the animals." Officer Martinez turned to Karen with an expression that was professionally neutral, but somehow also conveyed that he was very tired of this situation. "Ma'am, there are no violations here. Ms. Mitchell is in full compliance with all county ordinances and zoning laws. Her animals are healthy and properly cared for." But they're horses," Karen shrieked, "in a neighborhood. In a residential agricultural zone, which allows for livestock," the female officer said. "We can't cite someone for doing something that's completely legal." "This is ridiculous. I know the sheriff personally. I'll be calling him about this." Karen's face was bright red now. "That's your right, ma'am," Officer Martinez said calmly, "but I assure you our report will show no violations were found." He turned to me. "Ms. Mitchell, you're all set. Sorry to bother you." "No problem, officer. Thank you for being so thorough." As the police cars pulled away, Karen stood in my driveway, shaking with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "Not even close." "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle despite my frustration, "why are you so upset about this? The horses aren't hurting anyone. They're quiet, they're clean, and the neighbors' kids love them." "Because this is my neighborhood," she shouted. "I've lived here for 15 years. I've worked hard to make this community what it is, and I won't let some Some farm girl come in here and ruin everything." With that, she stomped back to her SUV and peeled out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on my grass. I stood there for a moment, feeling shaky. Tom Rodriguez walked over from his yard, where he'd apparently been watching the whole thing. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I think so. That was intense." "Karen called the cops on you." Betty had joined him, looking shocked. "That's absolutely insane." "She's really upset about the horses," I said. Tom shook his head. "It's not really about the horses. Karen's mad because she can't control you. She's used to everyone in this neighborhood doing whatever she says. When you stood up to her, it drove her crazy." Over the next few days, I heard from several neighbors who'd seen the police cars. Everyone was supportive. Rachel Johnson brought over a casserole. Mr. Patterson stopped by with his beagle to check on me. Even people I barely knew sent kind messages. "We are glad you're standing your ground," one neighbor told me. "Karen has bullied people for years. It's about time someone didn't back down." I started to relax again. The police had found nothing wrong. Karen's complaints had been dismissed. Surely that was the end of it. But I should have known better. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA this time. This was from the county zoning office. Someone had filed a formal complaint requesting a review of my property's agricultural designation. The letter said an inspector would be coming out within 30 days to verify that my use of the property was consistent with the zoning classification. I called Patricia immediately. "It's Karen, obviously," I said. "What does this mean?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "It means she's escalating. She can't use the HOA to stop you, and the police wouldn't help her, so now she's going to the county level. The good news is, you're doing everything right. The bad news is, these inspections can be very detailed, and inspectors have a lot of discretion in how they interpret regulations." "What should I do?" "Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Make sure everything is perfect. Document everything. And when the inspector comes, be cooperative and professional." I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of constant anxiety. I double-checked every aspect of my property. I made sure the barn was spotless. I reviewed all the county regulations about keeping livestock. I organized all my paperwork into neat folders. The inspector, a tired-looking man named Mr. Kowalski, showed up on a rainy Thursday morning. He spent 3 hours examining every inch of my property. He measured distances from the barn to property lines. He checked my manure management system. He reviewed my water sources. He even interviewed some of my neighbors. I followed him around, answering questions and providing documentation for everything he asked about. Finally, he stood in my driveway, making notes on his clipboard while rain dripped off his hat. "Well," I asked nervously. He looked up at me. "Ms. Mitchell, everything is in compliance. Your agricultural use is appropriate for this zoning designation. Your animal management practices actually exceed county requirements." He paused. "Between you and me, this was clearly a nuisance complaint, someone with a personal grudge. I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I can always tell." I felt like I could breathe again. Thank you so much. You'll get an official letter in about a week, but you're all clear." He tipped his hat and headed back to his truck. I wanted to cry from relief. I'd won, again. Karen had tried to use the police, and that hadn't worked. She'd tried to use the county, and that hadn't worked either. Surely now she'd give up. That weekend, I decided to do something nice for the neighborhood. I'd been so focused on defending myself that I hadn't had much chance to really connect with my neighbors. So I planned a little open house. Nothing fancy, just inviting people to come see the horses, have some lemonade and cookies, and enjoy a nice autumn afternoon. I made flyers and put them in everyone's mailbox, including Karen's. I didn't expect her to come, but I wanted to show that I had no hard feelings toward the community. The following Saturday was perfect, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze. I set up a table with drinks and homemade cookies. I brushed Buttercup and Thunder until they gleamed. I put out some chairs in the yard. People started arriving around 2 o'clock. Tom and Betty came with their grandkids who were visiting. The Johnsons brought all 3 kids. Mr. Patterson came with his beagle. The Chens, the Williamses, even some families I'd never met before showed up. Emma Johnson immediately ran to Buttercup, who recognized her and nickered softly. The joy on that little girl's face was worth everything I'd been through. I spent the afternoon teaching kids how to gently pet the horses, explaining how to approach them safely, and answering a million questions. The adults chatted and laughed, enjoying the sunshine. Several people told me this was the most fun neighborhood event they'd been to in years. Karen usually plans all the community events, Betty Rodriguez told me quietly, and they're always so formal and stuffy. This is actually nice. People are relaxed and happy. Around 4 o'clock, I saw a silver SUV slow down on the road. Karen was inside, staring at all the cars parked along the street, at all the neighbors in my yard, at all the smiling faces and laughter. For just a second, I saw something in her expression that wasn't anger. It looked almost like loneliness. Then her face hardened, and she drove away. "Don't feel bad for her," Tom said, noticing where I was looking. Karen's had plenty of chances to be part of this community instead of ruling over it. She makes her own choices. But I did feel a little bad. Despite everything she'd done, I wondered what made someone so desperate to control everything around them. What made someone so afraid of things being different? The open house was a huge success. As the sun started to set and people headed home, I felt happier than I had in weeks. My neighbors liked me. My horses were safe. Everything was going to be okay. I was cleaning up the last of the cups and plates when my phone rang. It was Patricia. "Sarah, we have a problem," she said, her voice tight with concern. "I just got a call from a colleague who does work for the Willow Creek Estates HOA. Karen has done something unexpected." My stomach dropped. "What did she do?" "She's filed a lawsuit against you personally. She's claiming that your horses constitute a private nuisance that's damaging her property values, and she's suing you for damages and injunctive relief to force you to remove them." I sat down hard on my porch steps. "Can she do that?" "Unfortunately, yes. Anyone can file a lawsuit about anything. Whether she can win is another question, but this is serious, Sarah. We'll need to respond, and litigation is expensive and time-consuming." I felt dizzy. A lawsuit. Karen was actually suing me. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "The filing includes a claim that your property should never have been zoned residential agricultural in the first place. She's arguing that it was a clerical error from decades ago, and she's asking the court to order the county to rezone it to purely residential." "Can she do that?" I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a long shot, but if she can prove there was an error in the original zoning. Sarah, if she wins this, you'd have to get rid of Buttercup and Thunder. You'd lose everything you've worked for." I looked over at my barn, where my 2 horses were settling in for the night, safe and content, and completely unaware that their entire future was in jeopardy. This wasn't just harassment anymore, this was war. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with worry. A lawsuit. Karen was actually taking me to court. The legal fees alone could drain my savings, and if she somehow won and forced me to give up Buttercup and Thunder, I couldn't even think about it without feeling sick. At 6 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went out to the barn. Buttercup nickered softly when she saw me, pushing her soft nose against my hand. Thunder came over too, looking for his morning treats. I hugged Buttercup's neck and let myself cry for a few minutes into her mane. "I won't let her take you away," I whispered. "I promise." Over the next few days, I met with Patricia several times. She explained that Karen's lawsuit had 2 main parts. First, she was claiming that my horses were a private nuisance, that they created smells, attracted flies, made noise, and lowered property values in the neighborhood. Second, and more seriously, she was arguing that the residential agricultural zoning on my property was a mistake from 50 years ago that should be corrected. "The nuisance claim is weak," Patricia explained. "You have documentation showing your property is clean, your horses are well maintained, and most of your neighbors support you. We can get statements from them, but the zoning challenge is trickier. If she can find evidence that the original zoning was an error, a judge might rule in her favor." "How would we fight that?" I asked. "We need to research the history of your property and the surrounding area, find out why it was zoned that way, show that it was intentional, not a mistake. It's going to take time and money." I left her office feeling overwhelmed. That evening, Tom Rodriguez knocked on my door. "Betty and I heard about the lawsuit," he said gently. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it. We want to help." "I appreciate that, Tom, but I don't think there's much anyone can do." "Actually, there is." He handed me a piece of paper. "We are organizing a legal defense fund for you. 15 families have already committed to contributing. We're also going to write statements supporting you, and several of us have agreed to testify if it goes to trial." I felt tears welling up. "You do that for me." "Sarah, what Karen's doing is wrong. She's not just attacking you, she's attacking the whole idea that our community should be diverse and accepting. Some of us have wanted to stand up to her for years, but we didn't know how. You've given us a reason." Over the next week, the support was overwhelming. Neighbors brought me meals so I wouldn't have to worry about cooking while dealing with legal stress. Rachel Johnson organized a fundraiser, a community yard sale where people donated items and all the proceeds went toward my legal fees. They raised $3,000. Mr. Patterson came by with something even more valuable. "I've lived in Willow Creek for 45 years, he said. "I remember when your property was owned by the McAllisters. Old Frank McAllister ran a small dairy operation there in the 70s and 80s, had about 20 cows. Everyone in the neighborhood loved buying fresh milk from him. That property has been agricultural for as long as I can remember." "Would you be willing to write that down, make a formal statement?" I asked. "Already done," he said, handing me a typed letter. "And I talked to some other old-timers. The Hendersons, who used to live on Maple Street, they remember it too. So does Margaret Chen's mother, who's 92. We're all writing statements." Patricia was thrilled when I brought her this information. "This is exactly what we need. If we can show a long history of agricultural use, it proves the zoning wasn't an error, it was intentional and appropriate." Things were looking up. I had community support, we were building a strong case, and I was starting to feel hopeful again. Then I got a call from Emma's mom, Rachel. "Sarah, I'm so sorry, but I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Karen came to our house yesterday. She told me that if I continued to let Emma visit your horses, she'd make sure my husband's contracting business never got another job in this community. She said she has connections and influence." My heart sank. "Rachel, I'm so sorry, I never wanted." "Don't apologize," Rachel interrupted. "I'm not backing down, and neither is my husband. We told Karen exactly where she could stick her threats, but I wanted you to know what she's doing. She's going around to all your supporters, trying to intimidate them." Over the next few days, I heard similar stories. Karen had approached Tom and Betty, threatening to report them to the county for some minor property violation. She'd told the Williamses that their teenage son's car was parked illegally, and she'd have it towed every single day if they didn't stop supporting me. She'd even threatened Mr. Patterson, saying she'd report his beagle for being off-leash, even though he never was. But here's what Karen didn't understand about communities. Sometimes, when you push people too hard, they don't scatter, they come together even stronger. Every single family she threatened stood firm. In fact, her bullying made more people angry. Neighbors who'd been neutral before started actively supporting me. The Hendersons, an elderly couple I'd barely met, showed up at my door with a check for $500. "We don't like bullies," Mr. Henderson said simply, "never have." Patricia filed our response to Karen's lawsuit. It included statements from 17 neighbors supporting me, historical documentation of agricultural use on the property going back decades, expert testimony from the county inspector who'd cleared me, and veterinary records showing my horses were healthy and well cared for. It was a thick document, and Patricia seemed confident. "Her nuisance claim is going to fail," she said. "The evidence is overwhelming that you're not creating any problems. The zoning challenge is still a concern, but with all this historical documentation, I think we have a good shot." The court set a hearing date for 6 weeks away. In the meantime, life had to go on. I tried to focus on the positive things. Emma still came over twice a week to help with the horses, and now her little brother Jake joined her. I taught them both how to properly care for Buttercup and Thunder. Watching their faces light up when the horses nuzzled them for treats never got old. One Saturday, Tom organized a community trail ride. He'd grown up riding horses and still owned a saddle. We borrowed a gentle horse from a nearby stable for him, and 5 of us rode through the woods together, me on Thunder, Tom on the borrowed horse, and 3 other neighbors who'd ridden before. It was peaceful and beautiful, and for a few hours, I forgot about the lawsuit entirely. Jessica came to visit one weekend and helped me paint the barn a cheerful red color. "You're going to win this," she said firmly. "Karen's not going to take your dream away." "I hope you're right," I said. "I know I'm right. You've got the law on your side, you've got the community on your side, and you've got the moral high ground. Karen's fighting a losing battle." But even with all the support and positive moments, there was a constant undercurrent of stress. Every time I saw Karen drive by, which was often, my stomach would clench. Every time the mail came, I was afraid of what legal document might be waiting. I started having trouble sleeping again. The worst part was the waiting. 6 weeks felt like an eternity. Finally, 5 days before the hearing, Patricia called with news. "Sarah, I need you to come to my office right away. Something's happened." I drove there with my heart pounding, imagining all sorts of terrible scenarios. When I arrived, Patricia's face was serious. "What is it?" I asked, sitting down. "Karen's legal team filed an amended complaint this morning. They've added something new." She slid a document across the desk. "They're now claiming that your property isn't just causing a nuisance. They're saying it's being used as an unauthorized commercial farm operation." "What? That's insane. I'm not running a business." "They say you've been giving riding lessons to neighborhood children and accepting payment. They claim you've been selling eggs from chickens. They're arguing that this is commercial agriculture, which requires different permits and zoning." I felt my face get hot. I don't have chickens yet, and I've never charged anyone for anything. Emma and Jake help with the horses, but their parents haven't paid me a single penny. I'd never accept money from them. "I believe you, but Karen has submitted photographs. Look." Patricia showed me pictures on her phone. They showed Emma and Jake at my barn, but they were captioned with dates and times, and notes claiming these were paid riding lessons. "She's lying," I said, my voice shaking. "Those kids help me groom the horses. They've never even ridden them, and their parents will testify to that." "We'll need statements from the Johnsons immediately," Patricia said, "and we need to address this before the hearing. This is serious, Sarah. If the judge believes you're running an unauthorized business, even if we win on the nuisance claim, you could be ordered to cease all activities until you get commercial permits, which you probably couldn't get for this zone." I felt like the walls were closing in. This was so unfair. I'd been nothing but honest and law-abiding, and Karen was just making things up. That evening, I met with Rachel and her husband Mike Johnson at their house. I explained what Karen was claiming. Rachel's face turned red with fury. "She's lying. Emma and Jake volunteer because they love the horses. We've never paid you anything." "I know," I said quietly, "but will you write a statement saying that? Will you testify if we need you to?" "Absolutely," Mike said firmly. "This has gone way too far. Karen's not just bending the truth, she's outright lying now. That's perjury if she's doing it in court documents." Patricia drafted statements for the Johnsons and several other neighbors whose children had visited my horses. Everyone signed them, some adding their own angry comments about Karen's dishonesty. But even with all these statements, I was scared. What if the judge believed Karen? What if there was some technicality I didn't understand? What if I lost everything? The night before the hearing, I couldn't eat dinner. I sat on my porch, watching Buttercup and Thunder grazing peacefully in the pasture as the sun set. They had no idea their whole world might be about to change. Tom and Betty came over and sat with me. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Betty said gently, "you've done the right thing. You've stood up for yourself, you've been kind to everyone, and you've brought this community together in a way it hasn't been in years." "But what if that's not enough?" I whispered. Tom squeezed my shoulder. "Then we'll figure out the next step. But Sarah, you're not alone in this, not anymore." I went to bed early, knowing I needed rest for the next day. I was just starting to drift off when I heard a noise outside. A strange crackling sound, and then was that smoke. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. My barn was on fire. Orange flames were licking up the side of the building, smoke pouring into the night sky. I could hear Buttercup and Thunder inside, screaming in terror. I didn't think, I just ran. I burst out of my house in my pajamas and bare feet, screaming for help as I ran toward the barn. The heat hit me like a wall when I got close, and the smoke was already thick and choking. I could hear Buttercup and Thunder inside, their terrified screams cutting through the roar of the flames. I'm coming," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. I grabbed the barn door handle and immediately jerked my hand back. It was scorching hot. I wrapped my hand in the bottom of my pajama shirt and yanked the door open. Smoke poured out, and I could barely see anything through the thick, black cloud. "Sarah, stop!" Someone grabbed me from behind. It was Tom Rodriguez pulling me back. "You can't go in there." "My horses, Tom, my horses are in there." I struggled against his grip, desperate to get to them. I know, but you'll die if you go in there. Tom was stronger than he looked, holding me back as I fought to break free. Betty was running toward us with her phone. Fire department is on the way, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, Buttercup and Thunder didn't have 5 minutes. The smoke was getting thicker, the flames spreading faster. I could hear them screaming, and it was the most horrible sound I'd ever heard in my life. Let me go, I screamed at Tom. I have to save them. Suddenly, Mr. Patterson appeared out of the smoke like a ghost, leading Thunder by his mane. The horse was terrified, eyes rolling white, but he was alive. Mr. Patterson's face was covered in soot, and he was coughing violently. There's one more, he gasped. I couldn't the smoke. Without thinking, I broke free from Tom's grip and dove into the barn. The world disappeared into thick, choking blackness. I couldn't see anything, couldn't breathe. The heat was unbearable, like being inside an oven. I dropped to my hands and knees, where the air was slightly clearer, and crawled forward, calling for Buttercup. Buttercup, here girl, come on. I heard her panicked whinny from the back corner. She must have been too scared to find the door in all the smoke and confusion. I crawled toward the sound, my lungs burning, my eyes streaming tears that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with the acrid smoke. My hand touched her leg. I grabbed her halter and pulled. Come on, girl, we have to go now. Buttercup was frozen with fear, refusing to move. The flames were getting closer. I could hear the crackling, feel the intense heat on my back. We were going to die in here if I couldn't get her to move. Please, Buttercup, I sobbed, pulling on her halter with all my strength. Please, I love you, but we have to go. Something shifted in her. Maybe it was my voice, maybe it was survival instinct finally overriding her fear. She took a step forward, then another. I crawled backward, keeping hold of her halter, getting her through the smoke toward where I thought the door should be. Everything was disorienting. I couldn't tell which direction we were going. My lungs were screaming for air. I was getting dizzy, my strength fading. Then hands grabbed me, strong hands pulling me forward, voices shouting. Suddenly we were outside, cool air hitting my face. I was on the ground, coughing so hard I thought I'd throw up. Someone was covering me with a blanket. Buttercup was beside me, coughing too but alive. Fire trucks were arriving, sirens wailing. Firefighters were jumping out, unrolling hoses, shouting orders to each other. I watched through bleary eyes as they sprayed water onto my barn, fighting to save what was left. Sarah, are you okay? Sarah, Jessica's voice. When had she gotten here? She was kneeling beside me, her face pale with fear. I tried to answer, but all that came out was more coughing. A paramedic appeared, putting an oxygen mask on my face. Just breathe, he said calmly. Slow and steady, you're okay. You inhaled a lot of smoke, but you're going to be okay. As the oxygen flowed into my lungs, my head started to clear. I looked around. Half the neighborhood was in my yard. Tom and Betty, the Johnsons, the Chens, Mr. Patterson sitting on the ground getting oxygen too, the Williamses, even people I'd never spoken to before. Everyone looked terrified. And there, at the edge of the property line, was Karen's silver SUV, just sitting there in the darkness, headlights off, watching. The fire was out within 20 minutes, but my barn was destroyed. The firefighters had managed to save about a third of the structure, but most of it was just blackened, smoking ruins. Everything I'd worked on for months, gone. But Buttercup and Thunder were alive. That was all that mattered. The fire chief, a serious-looking woman named Chief Morrison, came over to where I was sitting wrapped in a blanket. Ms. Mitchell, I need to ask you some questions. When did you first notice the fire? I was in bed, I said, my voice hoarse from the smoke. I heard a noise and smelled smoke. When I looked out my window, the barn was already burning. Did you have any candles, heat lamps, or electrical equipment running in the barn? No, nothing. I'd been out there around 8 o'clock to check on the horses one last time. Everything was fine then. Chief Morrison exchanged a look with one of her firefighters. Ms. Mitchell, this fire started on the outside of the barn, not the inside. We found evidence of an accelerant, probably gasoline, at the point of origin. This wasn't an accident. Someone set this fire deliberately. The world seemed to tilt. Someone tried to burn down my barn, with my horses inside. I'm afraid so. This is arson. We'll be conducting a full investigation, and I'm going to call the police. I looked over at Karen's SUV again. It was gone now, disappeared into the night. Chief Morrison, I said quietly, I think I know who did this. Officer Martinez arrived 30 minutes later. By then, news had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, no pun intended. More and more people kept showing up, bringing blankets, coffee, offering to let me and the horses stay at their properties. I told Officer Martinez everything. About the lawsuit, about Karen's escalating harassment, about her threats to my supporters, about seeing her SUV at the edge of my property right after the fire. That's not proof, Officer Martinez said gently, but we'll definitely investigate. The fire chief found some physical evidence at the scene, footprints, tire tracks. We'll process everything. Tom spoke up. Officer, I might have something that helps. I installed a security camera last month after some packages went missing. It faces the street, but it might have caught vehicles coming and going. I'd like to see that footage, Officer Martinez said. While they went to review Tom's camera footage, Jessica helped me move Buttercup and Thunder to a temporary pen that Mike Johnson had quickly set up in his backyard. His property backed up to mine, and he had plenty of space. They can stay here as long as you need, Rachel said, bringing out fresh water and hay. We'll take care of them. Emma and Jake had been woken up by all the commotion. They sat in their pajamas, petting Buttercup and crying. Who would hurt horses? Emma sobbed. They're so nice. I hugged her, not trusting myself to speak. Who would hurt horses? Someone desperate. Someone who'd already tried everything else and failed. Someone who thought if she couldn't win legally, she'd just eliminate the problem. An hour later, Officer Martinez came back with Tom. His face was grim. Ms. Mitchell, we have the footage from Mr. Rodriguez's camera. At approximately 11:43 p.m., a silver SUV matching the description of Karen Hendricks' vehicle drove slowly past your property, stopped for approximately 2 minutes in front of your barn, then drove away. 17 minutes later, the fire started. My hands started shaking, so she did it. The footage shows her vehicle, but we can't definitively see who was driving. However, we also found fresh tire tracks at the scene that matched the tread pattern of her SUV model. We're going to bring her in for questioning. Wait, Betty Rodriguez said. She'd been quiet until now. I saw something. I couldn't sleep tonight, so I was sitting in our sunroom reading. Around 11:45, I saw someone walking quickly away from Sarah's property toward the street. They were wearing dark clothes and a hood, so I couldn't see their face, but based on the build and the way they walked, I think it was a woman. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? Officer Martinez asked. Absolutely. As the sun started to rise, painting the sky pink and gold, I stood looking at the ruins of my barn with Jessica beside me. I was exhausted, covered in soot, my throat raw from smoke, and my heart broken. But I was also angry, angrier than I'd ever been in my life. She tried to kill my horses, I said quietly. She actually tried to kill them. We don't know for sure it was her yet, Jessica said, though she didn't sound convinced. Who else would it be? At 9 a.m., Patricia called. She'd heard about the fire. News traveled fast in small communities. Sarah, I'm so sorry. How are Buttercup and Thunder? Scared but okay. We all got out. Thank God. She paused. Sarah. I hate to bring this up right now, but the hearing is tomorrow. We could request a postponement given the circumstances. I thought about it. Karen had tried everything, the HOA, the police, the county, a lawsuit, threats, intimidation. And when all of that failed, she'd apparently resorted to arson. She'd shown exactly who she was and what she was willing to do. No, I said firmly, no postponement. I want this hearing to happen. I want to look her in the eye in that courtroom and show her that she didn't win. Are you sure? You've been through a trauma. No one would blame you for needing time. I'm sure. That afternoon, while I was trying to sort through what could be salvaged from the barn, Officer Martinez returned with news. We brought Karen Hendricks in for questioning, he said. She denies everything. Says she was home all night, says someone must have stolen her SUV, says it's all a conspiracy against her. But her hands and clothes smelled like gasoline, and we found an empty gas can in her garage that was recently used. So you arrested her? We're holding her on suspicion of arson. The district attorney will decide whether to file charges, but with the evidence we have, the video footage, the tire tracks, the gasoline smell, witness testimony, it's looking likely. Arson is a serious felony, especially when it endangers lives. I should have felt relieved. Justice was being served, but I just felt sad and tired. That evening, the neighborhood organized what they called a barn raising. for the next week. 15 men and women who knew construction volunteered to help rebuild. Local businesses donated materials. Someone even started a GoFundMe that raised $10,000 in the first 6 hours. "This community takes care of its own," Tom said simply, "and Sarah, you're one of us now." The next morning, I got dressed in my best outfit for court. My throat still hurt from the smoke, and I was running on about 3 hours of sleep, but I was determined. Jessica drove me to the courthouse, along with Patricia. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Karen was there with her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. She wouldn't look at me. Her hands were bandaged. Apparently she'd burned them when she set the fire. Several of my neighbors were there to support me, filling the gallery. The Rodriguezes, the Johnsons, Mr. Patterson, the Chens. Their presence gave me strength. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Anderson, called the hearing to order. Karen's lawyer spoke first, presenting all her arguments about how my horses were a nuisance, how the zoning was wrong, how I was supposedly running an illegal business. Then Patricia stood up. She methodically destroyed every single one of Karen's claims. She presented the neighbor statements, the historical documentation, the county inspector's report, the Johnsons' testimony that I'd never charged them anything, expert testimony about property values showing that properties near farms often sold for more, not less, because people valued the rural character. It was thorough and devastating. Karen's lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Then Patricia said something I wasn't expecting. "Your Honor, I'd like to note for the record that last night, the defendant Karen Hendricks was arrested on suspicion of arson for allegedly setting fire to Ms. Mitchell's barn in an attempt to kill her horses and destroy her property. While those criminal charges are separate from this civil matter, they speak to the defendant's state of mind and the extremity of her vendetta against my client." Karen's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, those are unproven allegations and—" "I'll allow it," Judge Anderson said coolly. "Please continue, Ms. Wang." Patricia presented photos of my destroyed barn, taken just hours earlier. She showed the fire chief's preliminary report stating it was arson. She showed the video footage of Karen's SUV. The judge looked at Karen with an expression of disgust. Finally, it was time for Judge Anderson to rule. She took off her glasses and looked directly at Karen. "Ms. Hendricks, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a clear case of harassment and abuse of legal process. Ms. Mitchell is operating completely within her legal rights. Your claims of nuisance are unsupported by evidence. Your claims about the zoning are contradicted by decades of historical use, and your claims about illegal commercial activity are demonstrably false." Karen's face was turning red. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "it appears you were willing to commit a serious crime, one that endangered both animal and human lives, in pursuit of your personal vendetta. The lawsuit before me today is dismissed with prejudice, meaning you cannot refile it. I am also ordering you to pay Ms. Mitchell's legal fees and awarding her compensatory damages for the emotional distress you have caused." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd won, completely and totally won. But Judge Anderson wasn't done. "Ms. Hendricks, I am also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office with a recommendation that they investigate whether your filing of this lawsuit, particularly the false claims about commercial activity, constitutes perjury and abuse of process. You may leave this courtroom, but I suspect you'll be back in one very soon on criminal charges." Karen stood up, shaking with rage. "This is an outrage. I know people. I have connections you can't." "Bailiff, if Ms. Hendricks continues, please hold her in contempt," Judge Anderson said calmly. Karen's lawyer grabbed her arm and practically dragged her out of the courtroom. I sat there stunned. It was over, really, truly over. Patricia hugged me. "You did it, Sarah, you won." My neighbors crowded around, congratulating me, some of them crying happy tears. Mr. Patterson shook my hand with his weathered, strong grip. "Knew you'd win, young lady. Justice prevails." We were walking out of the courthouse, everyone talking excitedly about celebration plans, when Officer Martinez appeared. "Ms. Mitchell, I need to speak with you," he said. "It's urgent." My stomach dropped. Now what? "We executed a search warrant on Karen Hendricks' property this morning," he said, "and we found something unexpected, something that changes everything about this case. Can you come with me to the station?" I followed Officer Martinez to the police station, my mind racing with possibilities. What could they have found at Karen's property? Jessica came with me, holding my hand in the back seat of the patrol car. At the station, Officer Martinez led us to a small conference room where Chief Morrison from the fire department was waiting, along with a man I didn't recognize wearing a county official's badge. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming," Chief Morrison said. "I'm sorry for the mystery, but what we found is complicated. This is Robert Chen from the County Zoning and Planning Department." The man nodded at me. "Ms. Mitchell, during the search of Karen Hendricks' property, we discovered some interesting documents. It appears that Ms. Hendricks has been conducting her own investigation into property zoning in your neighborhood for several months." He spread out papers on the table. She hired a private researcher to dig through county records, looking for anything she could use to prove your property shouldn't be zoned residential agricultural. But what her researcher found was something entirely different. He pulled out an old map, yellowed with age. "This is the original zoning map for Willow Creek Estates from 1952, when the development was first planned. Your property, Ms. Mitchell, was correctly zoned residential agricultural, but so were 5 other properties in the neighborhood, including 3 that are still undeveloped land, 1 that belongs to Mr. Patterson, and 1, he paused, that is now Karen Hendricks' property." I blinked. Wait, what? Karen's compound, her large estate with the fancy gates, sits on what was originally 2 parcels of residential agricultural land. When she bought the property 15 years ago, the zoning designation had been incorrectly changed to purely residential in the county database. It was a clerical error that happened during a computer system update in the 1990s. Her property should have always been classified the same as yours. Officer Martinez pulled out more documents. "Here's where it gets interesting. Ms. Hendricks found this information 2 weeks ago. According to her emails, which we seized as part of the arson investigation, she knew that if this error was corrected, her property would be rezoned to residential agricultural, the very thing she was fighting against for your property." "So she knew," I said slowly, "that she was living on agricultural land while trying to force me off mine." "Exactly," Robert Chen said, "but it gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. When Ms. Hendricks filed her lawsuit claiming your agricultural zoning was an error, she triggered an automatic review of all zoning in the neighborhood. That's standard procedure. When someone challenges one property's zoning, we have to verify that all surrounding properties are correctly zoned too." He pulled out another document. "During that review, we discovered the error regarding her property. We also found that she's been in violation of residential zoning for years." "How so?" Jessica asked. "Ms. Hendricks has a large ornamental pond on her property. According to her own property surveys, which were in the documents we seized, that pond is stocked with koi fish that she breeds and occasionally sells. She's also been growing and selling organic vegetables from a large garden, small-scale commercial agriculture, which requires residential agricultural zoning." I couldn't help it. I started laughing. I laughed so hard tears ran down my face. The irony was just too perfect. "So you're saying," I managed between laughs, "that Karen has been running an actual farm operation on her property, illegally, while trying to stop me from legally keeping 2 horses." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Robert Chen said, though he was trying not to smile. "And because she initiated the zoning review herself through her lawsuit, we're legally obligated to correct the error. As of this morning, her property has been officially reclassified as residential agricultural." Officer Martinez added, "She also has to either cease all commercial agricultural activities or apply for the proper permits and licenses, which will publicly designate her property as a farm operation. Given that she's been selling koi and vegetables for years, she'll likely owe back taxes and fees as well." I wiped tears from my eyes. "This is unbelievable." "There's one more thing," Robert Chen said. "Because of the zoning review, we discovered that the 3 undeveloped parcels in your neighborhood are also residential agricultural. The HOA has no authority to prevent agricultural use on any of these properties. In fact, the original development plan for Willow Creek Estates specifically included agricultural parcels to maintain a rural character for the community. That was the whole selling point back in the 50s. The county official pulled out one final document. "This is a notice that will be going to all property owners in Willow Creek Estates. It clarifies which properties are zoned for agricultural use and confirms that the HOA bylaws cannot supersede county zoning laws. Essentially, it's a formal declaration that Willow Creek is, and always has been, a mixed-use community that includes small farms." I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. So Karen's lawsuit didn't just fail, it backfired completely. Spectacularly, Officer Martinez agreed. Over the next few days, the story spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. The irony of Karen Hendricks, the woman who'd fought so hard against farms in the neighborhood, having her own property officially designated as a farm zone, was too delicious for people not to talk about. But what surprised me was what happened next. The district attorney filed formal charges against Karen for arson, attempted animal cruelty, and perjury. Her bail was set high, and she was released to house arrest with an ankle monitor. Her lawyer made a statement saying they'd fight the charges, but everyone knew the evidence was overwhelming. I expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. A week after the hearing, I was at the Johnsons' property checking on Buttercup and Thunder when I saw a figure standing at the fence line. It was Karen, wearing her ankle monitor, looking smaller somehow than she had before. I walked over slowly. Karen. She didn't look at me. I just wanted to see if your horses were okay after the fire. They're fine, we all got out. A long silence stretched between us. Finally Karen spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean for it to go that far, the fire. I was just so angry, and I'd been drinking, and I thought if the barn was gone, you'd have to leave, and everything could go back to how it was before you came. Before I came, you were still living on agricultural land, I said quietly. You just didn't know it. She laughed bitterly. The universe's joke on me, right? 15 years, I've been growing vegetables and breeding koi, thinking I was better than everyone else, and the whole time, I was the farmer I claimed to hate. I looked at this woman who'd made my life miserable for months, who'd sued me, harassed me, threatened my friends, and tried to kill my horses. I should have hated her. Part of me did. But I also saw something else, someone desperately unhappy, clinging to control because she didn't know how else to live. Why did you care so much? I asked. Really, why did it matter so much if I had horses? Karen was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. My husband left me 3 years ago. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 5 years because she says I'm controlling and impossible. I don't have friends, I have people who are afraid of me. The HOA was the only thing I had where I felt important, where people listened to me, when you stood up to me and didn't back down, when the neighbors supported you instead of me. It felt like I was losing the last thing I had. I felt a lump in my throat. Karen, people didn't support me because they hated you. They supported me because what you were doing was wrong, but it's not too late to change. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. I'm probably going to prison. Maybe, maybe not, but either way, you get to decide who you want to be after this. Karen wiped her eyes. I'm sorry for everything. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Nothing could really make up for what she'd put me through, but it was something. I accept your apology, I said, and for what it's worth, I hope you figure things out. She nodded and walked away, back toward her compound that was now officially a farm zone. The barn raising happened the following Saturday. It felt like the entire neighborhood showed up. Tom coordinated the construction crew. Mike Johnson brought lumber. The Chen family provided food for everyone. Even people from neighboring communities came to help after hearing the story. By sunset, we had a new barn. It wasn't as big as the old one, but it was sturdy and safe, with fresh paint and new stalls for Buttercup and Thunder. Emma and Jake helped me move the horses back in, and watching them settle into their new home made everything feel right again. That evening, we had a celebration in my yard. Someone brought a guitar, and we sat around a fire pit, singing songs and telling stories. It felt like a real community, not the fake, controlled version Karen had tried to create, but something genuine and warm. Mr. Patterson stood up and raised his cup of cider. I want to make a toast to Sarah, who showed us all what courage looks like, who stood up for what was right even when it was hard, and who reminded us that kindness and strength aren't opposites, they go hand in hand. Everyone cheered and drank. I felt my eyes getting wet again, but this time from happiness. And Mr. Patterson continued with a mischievous smile, to the official recognition of Willow Creek Estates as a farm community. May we always remember that our strength comes from our diversity, not from being all the same. Maury cheers. Tom laughed and added, who knows, maybe some of us will start using our agricultural zoning. I've always wanted chickens. I'm thinking about bees, Betty said. Honey bees, we could have our own honey. The conversation turned to all the possibilities. The community garden someone wanted to start, the farmer's market we could have on weekends, the 4-H club for kids interested in learning about agriculture, plans and dreams that brought people together instead of pushing them apart. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom again. This time, it was Karen's sentencing hearing. She'd pleaded guilty to arson and attempted animal cruelty. The perjury charges had been dropped as part of the plea deal. I'd been asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I did. I stood at the podium and looked at Karen, who sat with her head down, looking nothing like the imperious HOA president who'd first pulled into my driveway. What Karen did was terrible, I said. She could have killed my horses. She could have killed me, or Mr. Patterson, or any of the neighbors who helped fight the fire. Her actions came from a place of anger and desperation, and she deserves to face consequences. I paused, but I also think people deserve second chances. Karen made terrible choices, but she's apologized sincerely. She's begun therapy. She's reached out to her daughter and they're talking again. She's resigned from the HOA and started volunteering with a horse rescue program as part of her community service. I looked at the judge. I'm not saying she shouldn't be punished, but I'm asking for mercy too. Prison won't help her become a better person. Probation, community service, continued therapy, those things might. The judge sentenced Karen to 5 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service with animal welfare organizations, mandatory therapy, and restitution for the barn and my legal fees. No prison time, but strict conditions that would keep her accountable. As we left the courtroom, Karen stopped me in the hallway. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to speak up for me." "I know, but holding on to anger would have hurt me more than you. I want to move forward." "I'm selling my property," she said. "It's too big for one person anyway, and I need a fresh start. I'm moving to a smaller place and actually going to work at that horse rescue full-time. Turns out I'm pretty good with animals when I'm not too busy being awful to people." I smiled. "That's great, Karen, I mean it." She hesitated, then said, "The people who are buying my property, they're a young family with kids. They want to keep the koi pond and the gardens, make it a real working farm. I think you'd like them." "I'm sure I will." 6 months after the fire, Willow Creek Estates looked different. Tom and Betty had added chickens, and their fresh eggs were the talk of the neighborhood. The Rodriguez grandkids visited every weekend to collect eggs and help in the garden. The Chen family started a small lavender farm on one of the previously undeveloped parcels. The smell of lavender in the summer was incredible, and they sold sachets and essential oils at a little farm stand. Mr. Patterson, at 78 years old, got 2 goats. He claimed they were for keeping the grass down, but everyone knew he just liked having the company. And Karen's old property, the new owners, the Martinez family, no relation to Officer Martinez, turned it into exactly what she'd always claimed to hate, a beautiful working farm with vegetable gardens, the koi pond, some dairy goats, and even a few alpacas. Their 3 kids loved it, and they regularly invited neighborhood children over for farm days. Emma Johnson, now 9 years old, had become an excellent little horsewoman. She helped me give riding lessons to other kids in the neighborhood, actual riding lessons this time, though I still didn't charge money. It was just something I loved to do. Jessica moved to Willow Creek, buying a small house 3 streets over. She said she couldn't resist being part of such a special community. The HOA elected new leadership. Tom Rodriguez became president, with Betty as vice president and Rachel Johnson as secretary. Their first official act was to update the community handbook to celebrate, rather than restrict, the agricultural heritage of Willow Creek Estates. One sunny afternoon in May, almost a year after the fire, I was in my pasture with Buttercup and Thunder when I heard the sound of children laughing. Emma and Jake were running across the field with 3 other kids, all coming for their riding lesson. Behind them, I could see Tom checking on his chickens, the Chen's lavender swaying in the breeze, and the Martinez alpacas grazing peacefully. Smoke rose from someone's barbecue. Music played from someone's open window. It wasn't the controlled, sterile community Karen had wanted. It was messy and diverse and alive. It was perfect. I thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the stress, the lawsuit, the fire, all of it had been so hard, but it had also brought out the best in people. It had shown me who my real neighbors were, It had taught me about standing up for what's right, about forgiveness, and about the difference between control and community. And in the end, the woman who tried to ban farms from the neighborhood had inadvertently turned it into exactly what it was always meant to be, a place where people and animals lived together, where kids learned to care for living things, where neighbors helped each other, and where kindness mattered more than rules. Thunder nudged my shoulder, looking for treats. I laughed and gave him a carrot, then one to Buttercup too. "Come on, girls and boys," I called to the approaching kids. "Let's get these horses ready for your lesson." Their excited squeals filled the air as they ran faster. This was my life now. These were my people. This was my home. And somewhere across town, in a small apartment, Karen Hendricks was probably getting ready for her shift at the horse rescue, learning day by day that the farm life she'd fought against might have been what she needed all along. The universe has a funny sense of humor sometimes, and an even better sense of justice. Where are you watching from?